I don't want to do this episode. Hello, everybody.
Hi there.
I'm going to cut out my coughing fit there. I've had a fucking thing in my throat for like 2 weeks. Barely able to talk, but hey, we're going to muscle through. Hey, welcome back to Vertigo Voices.
Indeed, indeed.
I am Colby.
I am Sophia.
Yeah, we're talking Vertigo Voices. That was Karen O. Fuck, I closed the thing. That was...
Karen O. Yeah.
Shut up, I don't even have it up yet.
Pardon me.
That was... Why doesn't it just show it? Oh, it's going to play it again. That was Karen O. with Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. A cover of Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song.
I love that cover.
Yeah, that's from the 2011 David Fincher film, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Yes.
Because today we're talking about the Denise Mina Vertigo adaptation of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Vertigo had to get in on it, too.
Yeah, so Vertigo did adaptations of all three of Stieg Larsson's original novels. In fact, these came out before there was any of the other sequel bullshit. Yeah, these came out in between 2012 and 2015. So this is a property that I have a lot of affinity for, even though I've never read the original book.
Oh, you haven't?
No, I've never read the original Stieg Larsson novel, any of them. My first exposure to these was in 2009 when the Swedish films came out. The third one, called The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, was playing at the Magic Lantern downtown, and I was like, ooh, I've heard good things about this. And so I bought tickets to see it on a Sunday, and then Saturday I just watched the first two movies on Netflix. And I was like, this is fucking great. And then, I went and watched the third one in the theater. And since then, I've just had a lot of affinity for these characters, this world. It's very interesting. And, it's also very, difficult.
Yes.
It's not a property that's particularly a whole lot of fun.
No.
Because of what it deals with. And also, as a result of that's something that we should probably talk about right up front, because I don't know, this is not a subject that's particularly prone to a lot of lightheartedness.
Indeed, it is not.
So, we try to have a very acerbic tone on this show. I try to have a very acerbic tone. I just, I don't know, I try to be a funny asshole, I guess, is the way it's best described. One of our fans, who I actually talked to, in reality, outside of the show, one of the first times that we chatted, she commented to me, you're not nearly as mean in person as you are on the show. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of an act. I'm not actually, I don't actually yell at people the way I do on this show.
He's not this way all the time.
Exactly. And I mean, this is all theater. This is podcasting. This is just, I mean, obviously I'm not lying about anything that I feel or care about, but I also, you got to have some theatricality to it. You got to bump it up. You got to zhuzh it up a little bit. So that's why I'm more animated when I talk about shit that I don't like or that I love or whatever. Excuse me. Really getting over this fucking cough. I'm going to cut out all of the instances that I cough, but I'm going to leave in my talking about them, just so people are really confused.
Explanation for the edit, yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. I don't know how I want to do this, because, again, I really like this franchise, this property, and it's very personal to me on many levels. I've told you so many times how much I identify with the main character of Michael Blomkvist, and and even Lisbeth Salander, the titular girl with the dragon tattoo. But I don't know how I want to do this. I told you the other night, I wrote a little intro. I don't know if this should be just read verbatim, or if I should try to conversationalize this up a little bit.
I think you should read it.
I don't know. I'm just rambling now because I'm putting off the like high emotion that this story brings out in me. So anyway, I guess I'll just read it. Okay. This is a story dealing with generational trauma, sexual abuse, misogyny, among other things. It's a story that's deeply rooted in reality, despite some of its flourishes of fantasy. As such, we'll try to be our usual sardonic selves, but this is also a subject matter that deserves a level of weight and reverence. As someone who understands firsthand the powerlessness that comes from sexual assault, the last thing myself or Sophia want is for anyone to feel like we are belittling victims of rape and sexual abuse, or those who champion the cause of ending it. For all of you girls with your own dragon tattoos, for the Lizbeths, for the Michaels, who are struggling and doing their best, this episode is for you. I'm good. Anyway, so yeah, made it through that. As far as the story goes, my primary introduction to this was the original Swedish films. Then I saw the David Fincher adaptation, which was good. Like, it was fine. I don't know. Did you like it?
I actually like it better than the Swedish.
Oh, really?
I mean, I like the Swedish version, but I prefer Fincher's vision.
I mean, Fincher's just a better director. Overall, I mean, I guess it's like the same story. There's just something to me about Daniel Craig with a British accent being named Michael Blomkvist. And there's an unreality there that just bugs me.
No, I agree. I'm gonna mispronounce what's the Swedish actor's name who plays Blomkvist?
Oh, it's Michael
Nyqvist?
Nyqvist. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
You're the bad guy from fucking John Wick.
Yeah, there you go. No, I like Fincher's movie better, but I like his portrayal of Blomkvist better than Daniel Craig's.
I have a deep affinity for that character that comes from that movie, the first movie, and the second one. I mean, no, the original trilogy. There's something about his take on the role. He's kind of sarcastic. He's kind of disconnected, but he cares deeply about the truth, exposing like villains, and using everything in his power to do that. But then he's also very flawed, and I find that profoundly interesting about that character. And as I've told you before, I don't know, we'll get into it when we dig into the story, that like I've read way too much into every little thing that he does in that movie, and I've got my own spin on his whole like pathos and everything, and to the point where when I was reading the comic adaptation, I was like, I don't like this version of Michael.
Well, there wasn't much there, I feel like. And I think it's unavoidable. I mean, we are going to talk about the comics, of course, folks, but you can't talk about the comics and not talk about the books and the movies and so on and so forth.
I mean, it's all one big thing.
It is, and it's a big piece of pop culture. Yeah. I mean, even if you've never read the books now or seen the movies, Elizabeth Slander is one of those characters that's instantly recognizable.
And everyone knows the name, the girl with the dragon tattoo. Which is weird to me. So, okay, this is the first volume of the Vertigo comic. We'll just jump into it. The girl with the dragon tattoo, she's not really the star of the first book.
Right. It's
focused on Michael and his investigation. She's a very important character, but she's the Robin to Batman.
That's a good way to describe her. Yeah.
And it's weird to me that this book series... Okay, so the titles in Swedish are, let's see, the first one is called Men Who Hate Women. The second one is called The Girl Who Played with Fire. And the third one is called The Castle in the Air That Was Blown Up.
Well.
So, obviously, there's some translation there that doesn't really work for that third one. That probably means something more poetic in Swedish.
Probably, yes.
But it's weird to me the way the American publishers took this and was like, okay, Girl Who Played with Fire. Let's take that and then, like, retcon the other titles to fit in around that title. So, like, oh, she has got a dragon tattoo. That's not an important plot point at all in any of these books.
No.
But let's call the first book The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Because they point out that she has a tattoo of a dragon on her shoulder. It's not even that big of a tattoo. But in all the adaptations, it goes down her whole back.
Right.
And then they somehow, like, they worked the third one into the girl that kicks the hornet's nest. I don't know. Does the castle in the air that was blown up mean something about, like, stirring shit or something? I don't know.
Uncovering conspiracy like she does. I don't know. I heard, I don't know if it's true, and if by any long stretch we have Swedish-speaking listeners out there, I heard that when the books were translated into English, that a lot of the original fans felt like a lot was taken out. Like sure. The Swedish books, I guess, were supposed to be even darker and grittier.
Interesting.
But I don't know if that's true. If anyone out there does know.
Well, we're also basing this on the fact that Stieg Larsson died before any of these were published.
Right.
So maybe what they're referring to is like his unedited notes.
And on that note, I think if you want to discuss the other books, I haven't read those. I have read Stieg Larsson's books 1 through 3. But I don't think we're going to be talking a lot about the newer novels.
There are new ones?
I think they're up to like 5 or 6.
I was joking because I hate them. I'm just kidding. I've not read any of them. I've not read the old ones, the Stieg Larsson ones, or the new Imposter ones. You know, it's like fucking someone else writing James Bond. It's just weird.
Yeah.
But I did see the movie, the one that Fede Alvarez directed.
Oh, the girl in the Spider's Web.
Yeah, The Girl in the Spider's Web with Claire Foy as Lisbeth.
Yeah, you and I had feelings about that.
Yeah, that's just a bad movie. It turns Lisbeth into a superhero vigilante, and it turns her family into a bunch of supervillains, like literally James Bond villains. That's what you said. And it's just so strange. I have issues with the way her story goes in books 2 and 3. But the way that fourth book handled, like, I should say fourth movie, I haven't read the book, that's profoundly strange.
It is weird, and I have to say that, actually, that movie was the first movie-going experience where I've had someone give me, like, angry side-eye.
No.
Because I was there by myself, and it was the part where her sister is, again, dressed like a Bond villain.
Yeah, like all red and...
The stilettos.
Yes.
And she's got her in a latex bag.
Yes! Like sucking the air out.
As soon as I saw that, I, like, laughed out loud at the same time. I was like, this is someone's fetish.
Yeah. I mean, it is. Look it up. And that's an interesting image. But, I mean, my problems with that scene are then the explosions happen, and that weird... open concept apartment that she lived in. It's one of those things that you'd see in like an 80s movie. Like, I live in a loft above a nightclub or whatever.
Right.
It's totally what it looked like. And then when it starts blowing up, it just looks like a set. Like, it looks like a stage.
Yeah.
And like fire doesn't have, like, the fire has no weight. It's just clearly like some, you know, a controlled burn behind a bathtub. Like, it doesn't look right at all. It looks so stagey and weird. And that fits the whole stagey weirdness of that movie, I guess. But, for this story and character and universe that's so real and gritty, it feels weird to go in that direction with it. This first book is laced with statistics.
Right.
About real statistics about violence against women in Sweden. So why do you go from that to like, I got a microchip that's gonna blow up the world or whatever?
Right, exactly. Yeah,
like in Stephen Merchant created this thing that's the secret to global. I don't even remember what, but that's fucking dumb.
Yeah, it was too much of a stretch for me.
And I again like the third. I mean, this isn't even the fucking focus of the episode, but whatever. That fourth movie is all about. Ooh, she has a secret sister that's evil. Like you've done that. You can't do that twice.
Right.
In book 2, it's revealed that she's got a secret brother that's evil.
Yes.
And like now you've got, are you fucking kidding me? Like that's a trope you can't use more than once. You probably shouldn't use it once. It was a little forced in this series, the original series. But then to have that come back and like, oh, you've got another secret sibling and they want to destroy the world. Oh my God. I have my issues with those second books, but or second and third books, but that fourth one just pushes it way over the edge. Although her sister is mentioned in the first book, the first or second book. I can't remember.
I think the second one.
Like I think it's when Blomquist is reading her file. It says that Zala, her dad, had two daughters, had twin daughters, Elizabeth and Camilla. So, like, interesting. I wonder if Larson was actually planning on doing anything with that. Because if he had the idea to make her a supervillain, it's a bad idea. But if someone else forced it in there, it's even worse.
Right. And you and I were discussing that in terms of who we think Lisbeth Salander is based on the books and the movies. The first three books. And she's many, many things, but she's not omnipotent. And I felt that that's what they tried to do in the fourth movie.
I wanted to turn her into Batman.
Right, exactly.
One of the first, her introduction to the movie is when she goes in, she like sneaks into the house of that like lawyer or whatever who's abusing his wife.
Yeah.
And the first shot is her framed in silhouette with like an angel statue around her. And its wings make big black wings around her to make it look like she's some sort of creature of the night.
Symbolism!
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, we get it.
We understand.
Thanks. Well, you're doing too much.
Oh, much too much. And I think that's what makes... I'm going to mispronounce her name, too. Is it Noomi Rapace?
Yes.
Noomi Rapace, okay. That's what makes her portrayal and Rooney Mara's portrayal so interesting. And it's taken from the books, too, is that Lisbeth Salander is so unassuming when you look at her. She's just doesn't seem like much, very quiet, but when she snaps and is forced into situations of violence, it's really electric and scary. And I think for me, the girl with the spider's web, when it just opened that way and we went right into superhero territory, I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know if I dig this vibe. And surprise, surprise, I did not.
So, wait, one weird thing, or one funny thing about Noomi Rapace I was just looking into. So I think I've told you before, like every year on Letterboxd, maybe I have not talked to you about this. Every year on Letterboxd, I try to like pick an actor and just force them up to the top of my analytics of who I've watched the most of. Last year it was Tom Jane. So this year I was like, I watched the 3 Dragon Tattoo movies, and then I noticed that she was naturally at the top of my list because of that. I'd also watched Prometheus with my kid. So I'm just going to start watching a bunch of her movies. So I have been. She's been in some shit, man. Most of her American movies are just not good. She did a terrible movie with Brian De Palma.
Did she?
Yeah. Her and Amy Adams. No, not Amy Adams.
Rachel McAdams?
Rachel McAdams, yeah.
Okay, what's the name of it? I remember seeing the trailer.
It's called Passion.
Okay. Pardon me.
Anyway, I found out, so she got married in 2001. I can't remember the guy's name, but when they got married, they decided to just both pick a new last name. Her original name is Norin. Her name was Noomi Norin. And then she got married, and they both picked the name Rapace to take together.
Oh, interesting.
And they said it because it's French for bird of prey, and they just thought it sounded cool, so they picked that. And now that's been her professional name ever since. And that got me thinking, like, why don't we just do that? Like, why don't people do that? That's fucking weird that they don't. Like, the more I was thinking about it, I'm like, we have this weird, like, patriarchal idea of, like, passing on, like, the male lineage or whatever. But, like, who the fuck cares? It's just a name.
Right.
Like, why don't, when two people get married, why is it automatically assumed that the male's name is going to be picked? And why don't you just combine it to make something new, symbolizing your new life together? Like that, logically, that just makes sense to me. But I'd never thought about that until like 2 days ago.
Well, that's kind of special too, I feel like, because you get to pick something together that's
Yeah,
yours.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not like your fucking bloodline changes or whatever. It's just the name.
It's amazing though how passionate and strident some people get about that. But
It's amazing how passionate and strident people get about a lot of things that are fucking dumb.
It's a very, 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 very long list.
Because I'm an alpha male.
Oh, God. No.
That goes back to a conversation we had earlier that you didn't hear.
But it definitely does tie in with, patriarchal thought, and patriarchal views, which are very, very much galvanized and challenged in these books and these stories. So,
okay, going back to the titles. I think the original title, Men Who Hate Women, is just a better title. It is profoundly confrontational and provocative, and it forces the point of this story in your face from the title. Girl with a Dragon Tattoo is sexy and mysterious.
It is.
Men Who Hate Women is a brick to the face. Like it lets you know this is not going to be fun, and you're going to have to think about your life and your interactions and reality.
Yeah. That's a good point. That will take us down another rabbit hole that, let's put a bookmark in that and come back to it. I do like that title better. Yeah, I wish they had stuck with that.
Yeah, I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh, I understand why they would change it. Because, again, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. Ooh, this is seductive. And it just... good reason why it got popular in America is probably because of that title.
It is, it's not a bad title. Granted, it made me curious to know who is the girl with the dragon tattoo and what is she about. But I prefer the brick to the face.
Yeah, given what the story is,
yes,
the other title is far more appropriate.
Absolutely.
But again, who knows? It probably would not, you're not going to see soccer moms reading Men Who Hate Women while they're sitting on the subway.
That is true. You gotta lure them in.
As a result of that title change, in America, it changed the name of the franchise. Because the original story, in Sweden, this is called the Millennium series.
Right.
In America, it's called the Dragon Tattoo series.
Oh.
The DVD set that I loaned you.
Yeah.
It says the Dragon Tattoo trilogy across it. Oh, and even though when you watch it, it says Millennium. And every episode opens with Millennium Chapter 1 or Millennium Chapter 2. Because that was another thing. So the original Swedish version of this story, or the original Swedish adaptation of this story, it's a 3-part film series. And then it was recut into a TV series called Millennium. And every episode was 90 minutes long, and every story is a 2-parter. So that means The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is a 3-hour story. And then same with the sequel and same with the third one. So that version is actually longer than the theatrical cut. So I think the theatrical cut was a little over 2 hours, but now that's the director's cut of each of those stories.
Right.
Which I really enjoyed the Millennium version. I'd never seen it until just a few months ago. Which is another thing. The whole fucking reason we're even talking about this is because just a few months ago, I saw it on my shelf because I bought the Millennium edition of these 5 years ago. And was just I haven't watched those yet. I'm going to watch them. So I just, one day, I guess it was a weekend, I watched the whole fucking 9 hours of that. And then was oh yeah, they had a Vertigo book about that. Well, I guess that's what we're talking about.
Excellent choice. Turned out well, as a matter of fact.
So, okay, Denise Mina did the comic book. I've not made my distaste for her work in the past a secret. She had a run on Hellblazer that I thought was the worst of the series. She evidently is a decent writer. She's done other stuff that's very popular. I don't know, but I've not read any of it. And this is a pretty easy target to hit. There's, to my knowledge, not a whole lot that's different between the novel, and the movies. There are a couple differences, which we'll get to. There's one specifically that I think I brought up to you before you read it that really bugged me. And then there's a pacing thing. So you've read the original novel?
Yes.
Okay. Did Michael go to jail at the end or in the middle?
In the middle.
In the novel?
Yeah.
Fuck, that's really annoying to me.
Is it?
In the movie, so the first movie ends... Okay. Back it up. So... The story opens with the main character, Michael Blomkvist, having a jail sentence in his future. He's a journalist who wrongfully, air quotes, accused a major corporation of impropriety, They sued him, and he lost. So it opens with him knowing that he's going to be spending like a 3-month stint in jail. Mm-hmm. And before he goes to jail, he gets tasked with searching into this family history, like this family secret of this murdered girl that this old man believes was murdered in the 60s, and that he thinks the killer's still out there because the killer is sending him flowers every year.
Right.
And so he wants Michael to look into this family history of these psychopaths and figure out who did it. And so Michael has this ticking clock of figuring it out before he goes to jail. Mm-hmm. That's the way the movie portrays it. Well, in the book, he's like, oh, just so you know, I'm going to be going to jail soon. He's like, all right, just do what you can. So he works on it. And then he's like, well, got to go to jail now. And the story just grinds to a halt so he can go to jail. And then he comes back and is like, all right, well, jail was jail. Time to get to work. I'm like, but that feels so fucking weird to break up the narrative that way. Because, I liked that idea of trying to get this done before he has to serve his time. Mm-hmm. And it just creates a nice capper to the story.
Yeah, I could see taking it that direction. But you bring up a valid point. In the book, I didn't think about it that much because his sentence gets reduced. Mm. He's not in there that long. But yes, the pacing in the comic feels off. So when he goes to jail, it just seems like... I feel like there are a lot of panels, no offense to the artists, where they just were trying to fill space and they weren't quite able to make it feel like a story. It just felt like I was looking at comic book panels.
The first book has a lot of pages without dialogue. It's supposed to be showing the characters doing something, or in some cases I feel like it's supposed to show the mundanity of their life, like this one.
Right.
I don't know. I'm just looking at this. I don't even know who the fuck that is. Is that Lisbeth?
It's Elizabeth.
Okay. Then I think it's supposed to show her isolation, maybe.
Well, she's bugging Winnestrom's apartment. Yeah. And I don't know, the weird thing it's weird to me. Maybe someone else out there who's read this doesn't think so, but for whatever, they have her try to blend in the comic. Here she's...
with wigs and stuff.
Yes, and
all smiley.
Quote unquote normal makeup.
Yeah.
And, that's an important scene in the movies and in the book, but it just kind of falls flat in the comic.
It's given a weird amount of weight.
Yes.
Considering that this is something that she could just be like, oh, I bugged his apartment.
Right.
And this takes 5 pages.
Yeah.
So let's see. Yeah, literally, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, excuse me, 6. 6 pages of no dialogue. That felt really weird. And there's a few times that happens in the book. That's something that's easier to do in a novel as opposed to a comic.
Right.
Because you can, internal dialogue, the narrator is always there explaining what's happening. So dialogue matters less in a novel than it does in something that's more visual.
Exactly. And I don't know, it might be different for people who have never watched the movies or read the books. You might come to this with a different perspective because it's your first experience with the property. But I feel like if you've had any experience with the property whatsoever, this really doesn't bring anything new or fresh to the story.
Yeah, that's true. I liked this series so far. So I finished the first book, which was aggravatingly split in 2. So I had to buy 2 fucking books to read the first one in comic form. And then I'm halfway through the sequel right now, the fucking Plays with Fire. Which I've actually enjoyed Plays with Fire better than the movie version. There's something about the way the story is told in the comic that I just enjoyed better than the movie. Really? So far, at least. Even though the art is weird. In the first volume, the art is done by Leonardo Manco and Andrea Moody, I don't know. And in the sequel, it's them, but they also add Antonio Fuso. So Fuso and Manco both worked on Hellblazer. I think one of them with Denise Mina. The difference in art, though, it's not split up chapter by chapter or whatever. It's just one page, you're looking at one artist, you flip the page, and now there's a different artist. And that would be okay, except that there are certain characters or events or things that are changed. like there's the investigator in the second book. He's drawn to always be wearing a yarmulke, and he has a bald head and a little like bushy goatee. Well, when one artist draws him, he's got a big, thick, bushy goatee. When another artist draws him, he's got tight, cropped, little stubbly goatee. When one artist draws him, his bald head is growing out a little bit, so he's got stubble. When another artist draws him, it's clean shaven. And like the back and forth, like it's fucking there's got to be consistency there, or else it's gonna drive me nuts.
Right. Well, like you were saying earlier, it's like they didn't have time, or for whatever reason didn't coordinate their notes. And
well, they were clearly working at the same time, and they clearly had like a character sheet saying bald, goatee, yarmulke, and each person interpreted that their own way. Same thing with Dag's murder in the second book. You see his wife shot on the couch, and she was wearing flip-flops, but they're scattered down on the floor. Right. And then when the next artist draws that same scene, she's wearing like house slippers, and they're just on her feet. And that's something that would be more forgiven if this was like a different chapter. But when you see one and then go 1 to 2 pages, and then you see the other, like that's really off-putting and really annoying.
I haven't started reading that yet. I would like to. But yeah, something about quality control, it sounds like, that didn't quite make it.
I don't even know that it's quality. I mean, you could argue that this is just artistic interpretation, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. It's just the way I perceive it. That's very difficult to get past. Mm-hmm. And again, if this was like a chapter break, I wouldn't care nearly as much. But it's not.
It lacks cohesion.
Yeah. So, okay, anyway, let's try to focus on the first one here now. So the first story, I just kind of ran through the basic plot. It's a mystery. It's a detective story. I fucking love that shit. Eventually, Michael's investigation gets him teamed up with Lisbeth because she's got her own investigations going and her own shit. And seeing those two together, like, I fucking love the little team that they create. And I think that's done a hell of a lot better in the movie than in the book. The graphic novel.
Yeah.
They come together really late in the graphic novel, and they don't spend a whole lot of time together.
Yeah.
There's a few parts in the movie where they're like together on the investigation, and like they work through the whole thing with the names and the biblical things.
Right.
Whereas in the book, it's his daughter that figures that out.
Right. Yeah.
And like that's fine. Whenever you can show some shit with his daughter, but she is not an important character at all in the movie. She's referred to. I don't even think she's seen.
I don't think so either.
She's referred to occasionally, but in the book, like, Michael's relationship with his daughter is a little bit more important, but it's not even that important. Like, I don't know. Cut the fat, man.
Yeah. Yeah, well, she was in Fincher's version.
Yeah, briefly.
Briefly, yeah.
They're at a cafe together or something, right?
Yeah, she comes out to visit him.
Yeah. Oh, okay, never mind. I'm thinking of a different scene.
Yeah, I appreciate that about the Swedish films. They have much more Rapace and Nyqvist.
Sure.
Again, forget my pronunciation. They have really strong chemistry together. And when they team up, you do get that exciting, like we're solving a mystery type of feeling. And that was fun to watch. I do like Rooney and Craig together. They're fine, but I don't think they quite had the connection that the Swedish leads did.
And I just love that they balance each other. Like, they have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they play off against that like the characters do, like, really well. I love that she's like a fucking tech head.
Right.
And he can barely check his email. And the fact that she's smart in some ways and he's smart in others, and like they both kind of meet in the middle with their abilities and intelligence. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're a good team.
And I like that they recognize the goodness in each other despite their own flaws.
Yes.
Because they're both very flawed characters, but also very strong. Mm-hmm. And the weird little relationship that they create. And that's another thing that I felt stronger in the movie than in this graphic novel, is just the relationship between the two. Right. There's a really, really unique back and forth between them in that movie that also I probably didn't feel strongly in the Fincher movie, though it's been a long time since I've seen it. But the connection between those two felt so strong to me in that movie, which, again, I've got my own, like, my own shit to work out when it comes to that. But just something about their chemistry, both just like professionally and then like when they become sexually involved, was really fucking interesting. So they work the case for a little bit, and then is it when he gets injured, or is he just asleep? When she comes in and wants to have sex with him.
It's in the movies. It's when he's just asleep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right out. Yeah, they come to the hotel, and he reaches over to wake her up, and she freaks out because she's having a bad dream. Yeah. And then later she is thinking about. Well, yeah, she goes to him, and it's a good scene. It's well written. It's well acted.
Well, just the way that it goes. So okay, so Blomkvist is shown to be I don't know, a sexual creature. Like he likes getting his dick wet on occasion. He has a strange, almost like emotionally masochistic relationship with his editor, Ricky.
Erica.
Yeah, they call her Ricky in the comic.
Oh, they do. Yeah.
It's like he says that they were kind of an item before she got married, and now she's married, but they still fuck on occasion, and they have like this weird kind of like open relationship thing. Mm-hmm. In the comic, he fucks a few other randos, and in the movie, it's mostly just Ricky. And then when he and Lisbeth get together, there's a moment where like after they have sex, and he's like, "Oh, dear, you gonna stay?" She's like, "No, I'm gonna go back to my room now."
Right.
And then like the next morning, I fucking love this scene. The next morning, she's out front, like she's outside smoking, and he's inside just watching her. And there's this look in his eyes. I'm like, oh, dude, that motherfucker is in love. I know that look. I have been there, Captain. And then she comes in, and he makes her breakfast, and she's like really surprised. And then he sits across from her while she's eating her breakfast, sipping his coffee, just watching her eat it. Again, there's a look in his eyes where he sees that she likes the breakfast, where he's just like, yeah, good job. He feels so proud of himself in that little moment, that little bit of appreciating the fact that somebody likes what he's done. And that's another one of those things where I'm reading way too much into this guy because I've fucking been there, man. And then fast forward to when he's in his prison sentence or whatever. When she gets there to give him documents. So again, this is like end of the movie after all the fucking... We found out who the killer is. He's doing his prison sentence, which again, this just makes more fucking sense to have that at the end. He's doing his prison sentence, and she comes in to give him documents. And he looks like a kid on Christmas morning when she comes in. He's like, hey! He looks so excited. And she's very flat and cold with him. And then you can see his tone shift throughout that scene where he's just like, okay, I guess we're just buddies, never mind. Mm-hmm. And then she goes to leave, and then she turns around and kisses him, and then goes out. And then he's like, ooh, like you can see then that like kind of building him up again. And then you see a little bit from her point of view. You can kind of see her start to warm up to him again, because before it was just kind of what's the word? Like a fuck by way of proximity, like. He was there, they were sharing a moment, so they had sex, But then you can see her start to warm up to him, and then at the end of the movie, she goes, assuming to kind of be like, hey, let's give this a shot. And then she sees him, like she's waiting on the street for him in front of his office. And she sees him leave with Erica. And she sees him like put his arm around Erica. And she's about to go say something, and then she stops and just holds back. And watches him leave. And that was so fucking gutting to me the first time I watched that. Like, no! But also, like, I've fucking been there. That ships in the night. Like, you're so close to something that could be, could be the greatest thing in the world. It could not work out. Who knows? Right. But there's that possibility there that's so profound, and then it disappears.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And I obviously they stay professional, they stay friends, they stay, like, sidekicks to an extent throughout the rest of the series, but that first movie, that tease of love between them is so raw and real. Like that little description that I just gave you felt so much stronger to me than almost any other relationship I've ever seen in a movie.
Mm-hmm. You and I were talking about that earlier, and I and it's true, I said I was blurring your perspective with my experience of reading the books.
Yeah.
And having watched the movies now, rewatched the movies, yeah, they changed their dynamic quite a bit. Not a whole, not in a way that's bad. Like, I appreciate the relationship they have in the movies. I think it works well. But that leads into, like you were talking about, Mikkel is a guy who likes women, likes to get his dick wet. But in the comic, it seemed like it just, anyway, felt to me that Mina didn't know what to do with the women in Mikkel's life.
Yeah.
Like, from Berger to Cecilia Wenger to Lisbeth even, you never feel that connection, like he has a connection with any of them, where in the movies and the novels, he does.
Yeah. I think in the movie, at least, it's just by slimming it down.
Yeah.
When I read the comic and he fucked Wenger, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, how dare you, Michael?
Oh, it's way out of place in the comic book.
I was very frustrated by that. And I remember messaging you and be like, did they have sex in the book? And you were like, yeah, I think so. I'm like, God damn it. And like, again, that's just me being way too invested in this character, because in my mind, like, he wouldn't do that because I wouldn't do that. Which is dumb. But also, I say that, but then there's also bits in the book that I really did connect with him. And again, I say book, I mean comic. Jesus Christ.
Yes, we're talking about the comic book right now.
There are other moments of his coldness that I really did connect with him as much as I did in the movie version. I was just looking at this page. This part. So who is this?
Cecilia.
Okay, that's Cecilia. So there's a scene towards the end of the volume 1 of book 1 of the comic. God, I fucking hate that. Anyway, where he's like dumping Cecilia or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I realize that you will leave and I will be alone again, abandoned, alone again. I can't go on, Michael. And he goes, oh, okay. And she goes, we can't go on. And he goes, yeah, fair enough. And then, like, she's doing this to be like, like looking for like a dramatic conversation between them. And he's just like, oh yeah. And then he goes, fair enough. So, no chance of a lift to the station then? And then it cuts to him getting out of a taxi.
Yeah, no chance. Sorry, dude.
Yeah, I've been there too. That's just like one of those like, oh, we can't do this. Like, the love is too forbidden or whatever. Like, yeah, all right, sounds good. Well, don't call me. I won't call you either then. Have a good one.
I'm sorry, but I just can't fake this as big a deal as you think it is.
And again, like, I've had my share of heartbreak and, like, falling in love and all that. And then I've also been with a lot of people who immediately fall in love with me, of all people. Or I'm just like, oh, no, that's not what this is.
Slow down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, in the books, I mean, I'm going to sound like an advocate for the book version of Lisbeth and Mikkel. For me, the books as it pertains to Lisbeth and Mikkel is more about Mikkel learning how to be a good friend to Lisbeth, because he, like you said, he sees her strengths, whereas a lot of people don't. A lot of people have judgments and assumptions about her. And it's about Lisbeth learning to accept that friendship and let someone be close to her. Because I'm going to spoil the ending of the third novel for whoever hasn't read that. So, if you don't want to hear it, plug your ears. The ending of the third novel is, like, he comes to her apartment after all the shit they've been through, and she makes a conscious decision to let him back into her life. Whatever happens, she's decided that, this person is important enough to me that I want him around. So, anyway, my take on the relationship.
Yeah. I get that, and again, I haven't read the novel, but I just know that that chemistry between two characters is really hard to get right.
Oh, yes.
And in that first movie, it is so fucking perfect between them. And it's almost too bad that the other movies keep them apart for so much.
Right.
There's the second movie. She's on the run for a good chunk of it, and Michael's trying, like, I don't know, doing his own thing to try to help. And then the third movie. So the third one, this always bugged me. So at the end of the second story, he saves her from getting killed at the farm. Her father's farm, which is like a kind of a reversal of the end of the first story, where she saves him from the villain. And the third story opens with her in the hospital and him like next to her, like sitting next to her, and then he leaves. Mm-hmm. And then when she wakes up, eventually, you know, however many days later, he's not there because he's off doing his own like investigation or whatever. I mean, to an extent on her behalf, but also like, don't fucking leave, man.
Stay, yeah,
like stay. If your girl with the dragon tattoo is in the hospital, you fucking stay with the girl with the dragon tattoo. You be there for your girl with the dragon tattoo. And that, like, I don't know, that really frustrated me. And then in that third story, it's probably why I don't like that one. It's probably why I like that one the least of the three, is that there's often bits where, like, the connection between those two is kind of, like, pushed aside in response to the plot. It's like the plot's more important than the characters, which that always annoys me. Yeah. Character first, plot second. And like, there's a scene in the movie during the trial where when the trial is first starting, he's just like in the peanut gallery there, and then they're like, "Oh, we open to make this trial, closed room, whatever, like only the fucking lawyers and defendant or whatever." And then it cuts to him outside being like, "Well, guess we can't watch it. I'm gonna head off or whatever." I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, fucking use your credentials. Fight to get back in that room, motherfucker. Don't do that. And that just annoyed me that, like, the two main characters spend so much time apart, and there's a level of, like, disconnect between them then. Because, like, the whole point of this story is him fighting to help her. Well, at least his whole point in the second two stories is him fighting to help her. Mm-hmm. And when you see him just be like, "Oh, I guess can't do anything now. Go try something else." Like, that's fine, but more than any point in the story, she needs, like, a friendly face and an emotional support.
Right. When
she's A, recovering in the hospital, and then B, in court, facing her abusers, for fuck's sake.
Right. And, yeah, well, and that reflects the novels, too. Like you said, the majority of the second novel, their communication is, like, through email and messenger and things like that. But, yeah, they just, again, Rapace and Nivquist have such amazing chemistry together. It would have been nice if the filmmakers had tried to subvert the books just a little bit to further that connection or give us more of it. I would have been totally down for that.
Yeah, so anyway, going back to the whole story of this. Keep getting on tangents here. But hey, you know what? The characterization is more important than the plot. So
there.
It's more important to talk about that than the actual story. But I think the mystery in the first story is really cool. And the fact that there's a subversion in the end. They're looking for a murderer without a victim's body.
Yes.
And then in the end, you find out that the victim isn't a victim.
Right.
Like, the victim created her own story where she got to take her power back. That's profoundly interesting to me. Mm-hmm. And the bad guy's still the bad guy. Like, the bad guy's still a piece of shit who was just doing that to other people. And that was really cool to see that. Like, 'cause, I love a detective story, and you can't have a good detective story without a dead body. So to see the fact that there's a dead body and then there's not.
Yes.
And that was, but you still get the danger. Mm-hmm. There still is a villain. There still is a serial killer, and there still is a imminent danger for the main characters. It's not just a case of mistaken identity or like, "Oh, never mind. I guess you didn't kill him. See you later."
It was the butler all along.
Yeah, exactly. But I fucking love that. I think that bit at the end of the story with Michael finding out who it is, I think that's done better in the Fincher version. There's a lot of tension in that scene between Daniel Craig and, what's his name?
Stellan. Yeah,
Stellan Skarsgård. Whereas, I think the intention was different, though. In the Fincher version, it's all about the tension, all about the lead-up, all about that, like that fucking scene in Zodiac.
Yeah.
There's that you know something's wrong, and you're just waiting. The screws are turning. Whereas I think in the original movie, it's supposed to be the shock of it. Like, you're not supposed to be anticipating anything. and then boom, there's the killer. So I think because of that, those scenes are almost not necessarily comparable one-to-one. But regardless, they are because they're the same story.
Right.
And I think the Fincher version's cooler in that regard. It's also just David Fincher, and he's a really good director.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I like Fincher's version there better as well. And granted, he had a lot more money to work with than what the Swedish production had. But
lost a lot more money on that one too.
Oh boy, alas, alack. But yeah, there's things in his and it's so simple. It's just simple editing. Like when Elizabeth rescues Mikkel and she whacks Martin across the face with the golf club. I'm sorry, but like in the Swedish version, there's so many cuts that you can tell Noomi Rapace is just like hitting a bag.
Yes.
Whereas it looks a lot better in Fincher's version where she just belts him across the face. Yeah. But I should have gotten his name. The Swedish actor that plays Martin.
Yeah, I don't remember.
There's a moment between him and Mikkel that I personally just found super chilling.
When he gives him water?
Yeah, like, do you want some water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I fucking love that part. Yeah. And he's like, oh, thank you. And he's like, yeah, that's all it takes. All it takes to make someone feel like they have hope.
Right.
Just like one little nice gesture in the midst of all this horror, and you think I'm going to let you live, but I'm not.
That was terrifying to me. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I knew exactly what you were saying. As soon as you brought up that actor, I was like, oh, this is going to be the thing about the water.
Yeah, so whoever he was, excellent job, sir.
That part wasn't in the comic.
No,
I actually noted that there was not the water scene.
Alas.
So I don't know if that was in the original book or not, but that was fucking great in the movie.
Go ahead. Excuse me. No. You just reminded me of something. Speaking of the water, can I see the comic book real quick? I just want to make sure.
Only one or two?
No, two. Yeah, sorry. Switch me. I just want to make sure that I'm not misinterpreting this, because the first time I saw it, I was like, what the ever-loving hell? It is when Mikkel finds out that Martin is the bad guy. And, let's see here. Yes, this makes no goddamn sense to me. Okay, so Martin finds out that Mikkel knows who he is and has a clue of what's going on. And you get these panels here, which are pretty good. Like the knowing look in Martin's eyes, you can tell that he knows he's caught. But in the bottom of the panel, he takes this knife and he throws it at Mikkel, who dodges it. And then cut to the very next page, and mind you, the house in the comic book is a lot like the houses in both movies. It's surrounded by fucking windows and doors. Mm. The very next page, he runs downstairs into the lair. Like, he just runs downstairs. Yeah. He isn't dragged down there, he isn't forced, for whatever reason, and I know it may sound like a small nitpick, but that's so weird to me. Like, he runs downstairs straight into the torture murder room.
I think it's supposed to be like... I mean, my assumption is that it's supposed to be like he's just looking for an exit. He's just running, like, scared.
Yes.
But you go from the knife to just him going, ugh!
Exactly.
And there's not that connective movement, which is hard to do in comics. It doesn't fit as well.
Yeah, I would have been fine if they had done something like just stolen it from the movie, like he drugs him.
Or he just fucking hits him in the head instead of him dodging the knife.
Right.
Just have him take a blow to the head, and then he wakes up in the dungeon.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was kind of some of the lack of cohesion you were talking about earlier in the second book that I felt was also a little bit present.
Yeah, there's some weird. There's some weird pages in all of it where I'm just like going back and like, did I miss something? Like just like that. There's like often a very strange, like almost like a jump cut if this was a movie. Like a character is on one side of the room and then boom, they're over there. I'm like, what the fuck is? Did he teleport? Like, are we in the same city now? Why is the background different?
Where are we? Why are we?
Yeah. I wanted to bring up the Rebecca story.
Oh, yes.
I really, really liked that. So in volume 1 of the first book, fuck, I hate saying that. there's a bit where he's talking to a policeman that worked the missing persons case in the 60s. And he talks about another cop of his, or a cop friend of his, that this cop, I'll just read it verbatim and cut around it if I need to. He said, Michael says, "What was it about Harriet that you found so haunting?" He said, "You'd have to be a policeman to understand. Harriet was my sticker," quotes. "Every cop has one. The answer's a breath away. Someone knows what all of this means, how all of the pieces fit together. But either you can't find them, or they won't tell you. If you're not careful, it'll drive you mad. I knew a cop who investigated a nasty murder case in 1962. Rebecca. See, he talked about it so much that even I remember her name. A horrible rape. Then they put the unconscious woman's head in a fire, and that's what killed her. He left the force to continue the investigation, died destitute, wife left. Spent the last 20 kroner on stamps, sending letters to witnesses with new sets of questions. All cops have a Rebecca." That's another one of those things. I'm obviously not a fucking cop, but I get it. I understand that, drive to solve a mystery or figure something out so much that it drives you fucking nuts. And you know that there's someone that knows, or there's something that you just haven't seen yet. Mm-hmm. Fuck that eats at me for, I don't know how much we want to go into this, but you know what I'm going to talk about with Melinda Lopez.
Yes.
She's my Rebecca. For those who live in the Spokane area, look it up. Melinda Lopez, missing person. When was that? She was missing? It doesn't matter. We don't need to go into specifics of it, but
not that long ago. It was 2021 or something like that.
As we've mentioned before, Sophia used to be a journalist working for a newspaper, and a couple years ago, she was working the case for a missing person, and knows that I like to dig around in mysteries and shit like that, so she put me on the case, and I started digging around, and I found a lot of information that was very frustrating. And the more information I found, the more frustrated I got, to the point where, I'm looking at a jigsaw puzzle, and I can totally tell what it's supposed to be, but I just don't have those 2 or 3 pieces to make the picture clear.
You were stalled in the moment, but honestly, you found a lot more stuff than we did at the newspaper, even. So yeah, and that's both the sad and fascinating thing about her is that, again, like you were talking about earlier, a crime without a body.
Yeah,
it's like she just disappeared, and no one seems to know where she is.
And the goddamn threads that I picked at, and the fucking shit that I found, the people that I talked to, I don't know, that just frustrated me so bad. To think at the beginning, just to think that someone like that seemed to be just, I don't know, a normal person that maybe got caught up in the wrong crowd or the wrong place at the wrong time or whatever, and that person can just disappear.
Right.
Just not even disappear, be made to disappear.
Yeah.
And that so many people obviously don't care enough to actually find out. The people in power don't care enough to really find out where she is or what happened. And then the more I dig into it, the more of there's just an open secret about that. Mm-hmm. And the fact that one of the people that I talked to was like, "Yeah, look here, you'll find her body." And I'm like, "How do you know that?" "Oh, I can't tell you."
Oh, that frustrated me so much.
And it's being like, well, that's useless to me then. I'm not going to go fucking tromp around a 9-mile chunk of grasslands because you don't want to tell me why. That's...
Right.
And then that's fucking, I don't know. It doesn't matter. I gotta... The thing that frustrated me the most about that situation, and again, so many people listening right now aren't going to care about any of this, but or even know who I'm talking about or why, but the way that conversation ended with the fact that this person would not give me any proof of what this person said happened, you know? Like, it was literally just, if you look in here, you'll find the body. How do you know? I can't tell you. Why not? I'm not going to tell you. Why won't you tell me? It doesn't matter. If you, I'm like, okay, well, that's not how this works. You can't just say, oh, the answer to this question is this. How did you get to that answer? I'm not going to tell you. You don't even know the question, you know, whatever. It's just fine. And when I pressed this person on that, the only thing that they told me was, like, well, I'm not going to tell you. And I was like, well, then I'm going to stop asking. And this person said, well, then good luck sleeping tonight.
I wasn't even here for this conversation. Colby, you just told me about it later. And I got exasperated on your behalf because that shit, even in small town newspapers, that happens a lot. People are like, I have a story. You have to make it up, is basically what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful. I can't do anything with that.
No.
If I tugged at every thread like that, then I would not get anything done. And just the sheer amount of information that I found just on my limited amount of research was shocking. And so if this person that talked to me had that story, someone else did too.
Right.
And I don't know. Eventually someone will tell me more, but I don't know. Whatever. That really frustrated me. And that's way off topic. But
well, it is, but not too much. Because that segues back into what this book is, the confrontational part of this book, which is about violence.
And violence against women.
Yes.
And like I said, there's a lot of statistics in there about that. Which some of them, like, I don't know, there was one statistic at the very beginning that contradicted a statistic later. I don't know if you noticed that. It was...
I didn't. But the statistics are in the book, too.
Oh.
Larson's book, excuse me.
At some point in their lives, 18% of Swedish women have been threatened by a man. Which 18% sounds super low.
It does sound super low.
I mean, I feel like 75% of people in general have been threatened by a man. Yeah. I threatened myself earlier today. Jesus. Okay, 46% of women in Sweden have been subjected to violence by a man. So how can 46% be subjected to violence but only 18% be threatened? Is it the difference between a threat of violence and actual violence?
I'm going to assume, yeah.
But then why would the numbers... you would assume you'd get more threats than actual violence.
That does make you wonder about how much those... Excuse me. How much those people are reporting?
I guess. My biggest gripe with this is that all of these statistics are unattributed.
Yes.
Which annoys the shit out of me. Because if you can bring something up without proof, you can dismiss it without proof.
Exactly.
And that annoys me. So, like, if these statistics are real, I'd like to know, is it just here for color? Or is this actually trying to get a point across? Like, is that... Also, this is all diegetic. Is this within the story? Or is this in real life? Like, I mean... Again, like, you gotta have some... If you're gonna try to tie this really deeply with real life, then tell me directly.
Right.
Don't just say 18% of people have been threatened. If you're going to do that, then have the stat or have the place that poll was conducted, the year, and then the pertinent scientific information, or a footnote or whatever. Like, there's got to be something there. And I don't think there was even any footnotes at all in this.
I don't believe so. If there were, I totally glossed right over them.
No, it's just ads for the books. And Denise Mina's biography. I don't know, that was just frustrated me, but I would assume that Larson's books would actually have the backing information, statistics, or whatever. Because he worked in that field also.
He did. There is some controversy around Larson's, you probably heard this, Larson's version of who Elizabeth is based on and why he wrote the book. So... I don't want to say that doesn't lend credence to his work, because I think his work is important, and I love his books. And it's not even that they're masterfully written. Larson can be very verbose, and there's a lot of exposition dumps where characters are just sitting like we're sitting now, just talking back and forth to each other. But what he touches on is just so real and so vulnerable that I like to think that well, like you said, that he was getting his statistics from the right place. I hope he is.
That also, that the thing that you're touching on there about his Elizabeth Salander, who that's based on, that's all secondhand. Mm-hmm. His story. So, like, there's an oft-repeated story that he knew a girl that was gang raped, and he did nothing to help her. And he felt really bad about it after the fact. He never told that story in an interview ever. Oh, okay. He has friends who claimed that he told that to them. But a biographer said that there was also never any actual
interview where he says that.
He did say who he based Lisbeth on in articles before the books were published. He said part of it was his niece, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, Pippi Longstocking and his niece Teresa. He said she was a rebellious teenager, often wore black clothing and makeup. She told him several times that she wanted to get a tattoo of a dragon.
There you go.
The author often emailed her while he was writing the novels to ask her about her life and how she would react in certain situations. She told him about her battle with anorexia and that she practiced kickboxing. But yeah, the whole story about the gang rape thing happened after, like, that came up after his death.
Okay, all right. Well, that makes more sense.
Again, it's one of those things without proof.
Right. Yes, exactly. How quick the rumors do spread.
Yeah. But, the violence against women is obviously a huge aspect of this book, and that's, again, another reason why I like the original title so much, because you cannot separate this story from the idea of like, patriarchal abuse of women and the normalization of it. And like Lisbeth has a life filled with sexual abuse.
Right.
That's one of the things I did like about the second two books, is going into her history with Dr. Teleborian and all that. My main problem with those second two books, though, is it focuses too much on her backstory and how that just happens to fall into a story that Michael's working on.
Right.
That's fucking annoying. Like,
it is pretty damn,
I like
serendipitous.
in the first story, her backstory is briefly touched on, but it has nothing to do with the plot at hand.
Right.
And it felt very story-ish, too coincidental, kind of like a Bond movie, Oh, the bad guy was actually the guy from the beginning. Okay, I get it, And just annoying. Her dad's the main villain. I don't know. That was a little bit of a bridge too far. But, again, better than the fourth one.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
But, yeah, somebody who's endured deep sexual trauma and within the story itself is horribly abused by her...
guardian.
Yeah, her guardian. Which the only reason she has a guardian is because, again, like, abuse of power, forcing her to stay quiet. That's just such an intense, real thing. And I like the fact that the comic and both movie versions didn't shy away from the ugliness of that. Like, sexual assault is profoundly disturbing and can be very profoundly disturbing to talk about or deal with or watch. And a lot of people preferred not to have art touch on it, which I understand. But also, like, we fucking have to. Right. We have to deal with this as a society, as a culture, as a race. Realistically, you can't separate sexual assault from the history of humanity. No. And to an extent, you can't separate that from nature, really. We are smart enough and evolved enough to know what that is, but within nature, fucking sexual assault is a fucking Monday,
it happens.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh.
And I mean, that's just reality. I mean, like, I don't know. That doesn't fucking matter. I'm going into a whole fucking archaeological and fucking history of fucking the way bedbugs breed and shit.
Attenborough territory.
And literally, the way bedbugs breed is just rape.
Really?
Yeah. A male will mount a female and tear a hole in her back.
Oh, God.
And fuck it.
Oh, my God.
And that is traumatic enough to her that she runs away. And as she runs away, she drops fertilized eggs.
Good Lord.
And that's just how they breed. That's just life of a bedbug.
Poor bed. Like, why they already have it bad since they're a bed bug.
Yeah, exactly. So my point is, realistically, humans have it better than a lot.
Oh boy.
That said, anyway, so getting back to the fucking point of this, I understand why people would not want to see that in their entertainment or their media. But I also think it's very important to be confronted with this and to deal with it in a way that is at least, I don't know, if not entertaining, at least healthy. Mm-hmm. And to have that distance of seeing things happen to a character and see how they react to it and see how they overcome it can be profoundly cathartic. Yes. And you can't have that catharsis without the pain. You know, like, especially seeing Lisbeth and seeing her journey and seeing the support that she gets from people like Michael. That's, like, profoundly empowering to me. Mm-hmm. And important, I think. Again, like, I see a lot of myself in Michael, but I see a lot of Lisbeth too. And I don't know, maybe that's why I like both of those characters so much. I want them to be together. Just because I like the idea of two broken people like making a whole together. Like WHOLE, not HOLE.
I'm tracking, I'm following.
And I don't know, like, again, the sexual violence in this story, I think, is important and needed for what is going on here, and for, like, this is something that's worth telling. Right. And, like, fucking, like I said earlier, like, to all the girls with your own dragon tattoos out there, like, you're valid. Your story should be told. And, okay, none of us are Lisbeth Salander. None of us are fucking vigilantes. Right. None of us are going to hold our rapists down and get to tattoo on them the reality of what they are. Mm-hmm. But the most powerful weapon we all have in common is a voice. Right. And use your voice and tell your story. And there's power in that. And you all have more power than you know. So, I don't know. Be loud.
No. Very true. What did you think of the parallel between Lisbeth and Harriet's stories running side by side?
Wait, are you talking about the scene when that's the juxtaposition I was talking about. Motherfucker. Trying to fucking decipher my stupid notes. Oh, no! It wasn't. This was the juxtaposition I was thinking of. After the scene where Lisbeth is assaulted by her guardian, first of all, you see the aftermath of her strung out on bed, bleeding, and it just looks fucking horrific. And then he is just so nonplussed. Right. No, why don't let me drive you home? And she's fucking bruised and bleeding, and he's got a wound on her eye, and she says no. It's like, oh, I honestly don't mind. And then she goes, no. And then he goes, well, bye. And she just says, bye. And walks out. So you'll walk out in the snow alone, get home, and then she just sits in her apartment alone, smoking, staring off into the distance, saying, bye. And that bit of isolation is far better than any of the other scenes in the book about it.
Right.
And then from that, we cut to Michael in a very warm bed, waking up, having his morning coffee, chit-chatting with Ricky, and then, like, cut to them in bed together. And it's just warm, like...
Familiar.
Yeah, familiar, normal sexual relationship between two people. And that's another thing that I think is good about these stories, is showing that, like, it's not sex that's the problem.
Yes, well said. Yeah.
It's not the fact that humans have this innate drive to fuck each other. Right. Like, the problem is the power, the problem is the violence, the problem is the people that think they're better than someone, or that work out their own fucking inadequacies on someone that they can belittle and hold down.
Right. Can only get turned on if they're hurting someone.
Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, I thought that was a really interesting juxtaposition between those two. So what were you talking about then? Were you talking about, like, when they're telling their stories, or just the story in general?
Well, yeah. Let me rephrase that, because earlier you said, be loud, and there should be a space for victims to say, survivors, to say what they need to say. In terms of Harriet's story and where she's at, did you find that there was a parallel with Lisbeth and
Gotcha.
how they were able to even find someone who they could talk to?
Yeah, I get it now. For some reason, I was thinking you were talking about, like, within the telling of the story.
Oh, pardon me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, again, this is at its core, a story about women overcoming their surroundings or the fucking society that they're in, and finding their own strength and their own way forward. And I feel like Harriet and Lisbeth were on different trajectories and were put in very different situations, but they both found their own strength and their own way to get out of or work through the shit that was forced upon them.
I also, it's sad, but it's true in terms of survivors having someone to talk to. It's really interesting in the book and the movies too. Like Elizabeth, after she gets attacked by Berman, after she's sexually assaulted, like there's a whole part in the book where she goes home, and while she's sitting there alone, she's going through every single scenario of how she can get rid of him.
Yeah.
And she does consider going to the police. That's almost immediately off the table because she doesn't trust authority figures. Yeah. She thinks about telling Armansky, her boss, but she feels that he cares a little too much and would be too hovering over her. And then she's got, what's the name of her band?
Oh, the Five Finger...
Evil Fingers?
Five Evil Fingers?
Maybe? So yeah, something like that. Anyway, and it's so sad because she considers those women, even though we don't meet them, to be some of her, like her group. And she still feels like she can't tell them because she doesn't want them to know about her past. And then, of course, Henrietta, Harriet, pardon me, who does go to tell someone finally. She goes to her uncle, and I'm not blaming him because all of us have probably done this at some point when we needed to be listening to someone who really wanted to talk to us, and just in that moment, he's like, I'm too busy. Yeah. And then, boom, he doesn't see her again for another 40 years. Yeah. And Cecilia in the book, again, like her character just makes more sense in the novel. But the only difference between her and Elizabeth, she wasn't sexually assaulted, but her first husband was like beat her incessantly. And in the comic, it's this weird, like melodramatic burst out where she says that her husband stabbed her with scissors. And I think it's supposed to be an emotional, weighty moment, but you just don't feel it in the comic. Whereas in the book, she's talking about how that happened to her, and the only difference between her and Elizabeth is that she actually had someone to help her. Her uncle was willing to help her, but like her dad calls her a whore and says it's your fault that, you know, your husband does this to you. And then like the real heartbreaker is like they're together, her dad and her brother, and her brother, instead of coming to her defense, just like, ha ha ha, women, am I right, Dad? And as a result, she walks away and never speaks to either of them again. Unfortunately, like, it's still, we still talk about it because unfortunately it's still so prevalent. I mean, like you said, talking about this is hard. It's difficult sometimes to know how to respond to someone who comes and wants to talk to you about something that's happened to them. But unfortunately, like, we just need to embrace the awkwardness. Because there's still, we still have this culture. It's a culture of silence where, you know, people who have been through this feel like they can't talk about it.
Well, I feel like also some of our drive to try to make this better has done the opposite. Like one big thing that this is gonna make me sound really goddamn bad because of the framing of this, but feminism in general puts a lot of focus on the strength of the individual. Like, you're an individual, you're your own person, you can fucking do this on your own. Like, well, no, you can't. To be as nice as I can, like, you cannot do a lot of things on your own. I can't do a lot on my own. Most people need support. And especially when it comes to something like this, you need all the fucking help you can get. And that's why your voice has power. You need to tell that story to people that you trust, that you love, that will listen and believe you and help you. And like you cannot therapize yourself. Like you need somebody. And I've bitten my tongue about my own situation a lot in my life, and I realized how fucking damaging that. It took me years to even talk about some of the things that I've been through, and that's not even. My situation is a much more easy to deal with than a lot. Let's put it that way. But even then, like just that getting it out to someone helps so much, and we can't be alone in this. Right. So as much as you've got strength, yes, you do have strength. We all have our strengths, but you need others to support you in that. Like I always think of there's a line in an episode of Firefly that's when you can't walk, you crawl. And when you can't do that, you get someone to carry you. Mm-hmm. Like, it's nothing about your own personal strength if you need someone to carry you sometimes. Mm-hmm. Because we fucking all do.
We do. And it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to, even with people who love you, it's still hard to talk about that stuff. It's still hard to come out and say, this is what happened to me, and not feel like you're still going to be judged. Yeah. So I agree wholeheartedly. The concept of being willing to be open with something that is so hurtful and so damn messy, and our willingness as, friends, lovers, fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, co-workers, to be able to hold space for that, and make people feel like, it's like, you can tell me anything and you're safe.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere. I wish that didn't feel like it was so hard to come by.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a real fun story. Just,
I would like to. Do we have time? I know we're deep. We're deep in the woods here, and
we're recording this early just so I can spend extra time editing it, so we can go over. I don't give a shit.
Absolutely. I was reading an article about this very same subject and how it does pertain to film, and I found this writer, Christopher Petrello, in 2012. He wrote this article about mainly about the depiction of sexual assault in film and the girl with the dragon tattoo. And he asked some interesting questions that you and I are touching on here that I just like to read this verbatim. It's not very long. What happens to the rape scene when its reproducibility decontextualizes it to the point where it can become an erotic snapshot on the internet? If something so profoundly disturbing to many audience members can be so readily reduced to an opportunity to see Rooney Mara naked instead of Elizabeth Salander being raped, how can filmmakers continue to use sexual violence as a plot device? Is there something inherently manipulative and problematic about such an employment in the first place?
No. I mean, that's always going to be... Somebody taking your work out of context is always going to be a problem. It always has been, it always will be. This is just a different form of that. You can overhear somebody saying something without knowing what they're talking about and decide that they're the worst person on the planet. Mm-hmm. Or you can see a snapshot of something without context and think it's the cool... Whatever. That's not a problem. Mm-hmm. I understand it is a problem. It's not the filmmaker's problem. That's a way larger problem with society, fucking
the
internet. Yeah. Yeah. And that should never be on the onus of the filmmaker for someone not even misunderstanding, intentionally misrepresenting their focus or their point. Mm-hmm. You should never make art thinking, I wonder if somebody's going to purposely misunderstand what I'm making and put it into the world in a way that I wouldn't like. Because then we're never going to have interesting art. Mm-hmm. Like that, I mean, again, that obviously is a problem, but it's not the filmmaker's problem. It's a problem with a person who's doing it or enjoying it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's too much. You're right. If you start to think about that too much, you'll never make art.
Yeah.
You'll never make anything.
What if I make a James Bond movie? I keep saying James Bond. What if I make a G.I. Joe movie and a bad guy gets shot, and then somebody takes a gif of that bad guy getting shot and like jerks off on it? I don't know. That would be weird.
That would be weird indeed.
Yeah, that would not be something that I would want them to do. But I'm not gonna not make G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra starring Channing Tatum.
But of course.
How could we not have G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra directed by Stephen Sommers?
It's for
starring
the
Channing Tatum.
Right.
A Hasbro production.
Yeah, see, we would be deprived of that, and that would be a crime.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You just can't think of art like that, because then you're not going to be pushing any boundaries.
That's true. That's true. And there's... I don't want to say clever because I feel like saying that does reduce sexual assault to like, gotcha plot point, which no. Like, of course, the sexual assault scene in the books and in the comic and in the movies is like terrifying. I made the mistake of watching that with my father, and he stopped it. Like, he stopped it halfway through, and he was like, I can't watch this with you. And I was like, understandable. My bad.
Well, that's how it should be.
Right, exactly.
And when I talk about like the fact that there's sexual assault in this movie and that it's confrontational, well, I'm not saying that like fucking let's throw a rape scene and everything, because
No.
the intent in this is fucking clear. This isn't a 70s exploitation movie where like the rape scene is half titillation. Like this is a far cry from that, and. Yeah. I would assume that our listeners would be smart enough to know the difference.
I hope so.
Whatever. I got to throw in that disclaimer there.
You guys are pretty smart cookies.
Yeah. Because talking about taking things out of context, I can just imagine a clip of me being like, I like the sexual assault in this film.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
There's a clean one out there for all you assholes to take. And
there's your soundbite. Yeah. Agreed. The girl with the dragon tattoo is not I spit on your grave. It's not.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, that all comes back to intent. While we're on that subject, though, I do... There have been some instances in film of sexual assault that were just inferences. Mm-hmm. You don't see it. Yeah. That I find to just be particularly disturbing. Like, for me, Pan's Labyrinth and Mandy... I don't know, you might have noticed this, but like this was like the 10th time I was watching Pan's Labyrinth, and I never noticed this before, but I noticed it this time, and it made my heart drop into my stomach. The scene where the captain is torturing that rebel. Do you remember that?
Dude, I haven't seen the movie since theaters, so no.
Okay. I love that movie.
I love it too, but it's not one that I revisit very often.
Anyway, there's the scene in the movie, if you guys haven't seen it, slight spoilers, where the captain, the bad guy, is interrogating this rebel who's a man. And, of course, he tortures him, does horrible things to him. You don't see it in graphic detail, but you get the message. Later in the film, he catches the woman in his camp who is actually a spy for the rebels, Mercedes, takes her to the same barn, ties her up in the same way, gets ready to interrogate her, but he does one thing with her that he doesn't do with the male rebel, which is he takes off his suspenders. And don't ask me why, but when I saw that, when I finally noticed it, it just scared the hell out of me. So I think there's so many different ways that you can approach this subject. None of them are going to be comfortable, but I think like smart filmmakers like Fincher and he's not as good as the director of Fincher, but the director of the Swedish films, whose name, again, apologize, I'm gonna butcher.
First one, wasn't there, there's two different directors, right?
Yes, but the one who, it would be the first one, I feel like they both, for lack of a better explanation, they understood the assignment. Niels Arden Oplev?
Sure.
Yeah. Yes. I think they both approached it with a lot of actually compassion and respect for as horrible as those scenes are.
Yeah. Going back to like context or intent or whatever, like this is this is a story where that's important. Seeing the horrific nature of these horrific things is important. You're not going to feel what you feel for Lisbeth if you hear someone say, "Oh yeah, her guardian raped her."
Right.
That's not. I don't know. That's weird to say just because of something so horrible. But also, like, fuck, man, I watch a Rambo movie where he shoots 1,000 people.
Right.
And we don't give a shit about that.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Because that kind of violence, that kind of violence is acceptable in entertainment.
Almost expected.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I that's drama. That's the point of telling stories. But when I watch G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra, I don't care that that Snake Eyes guns down 100 Cobra troopers.
Right.
There's this recent trend that I've noticed, probably in the last 10 years or so, of almost like, you know what, never mind, I'm not even going to go into it. I was just going to have this whole thing about, like, well, if that character does it, then, like, that actor did that, or whatever. I'm like, well, it's not the same.
No, that makes sense. That's another topic of conversation, but yeah, it runs, and that happened recently. I can't remember what actor it was with.
The guy, Erectus Erectus.
Yes. Where he was like, guys, it's a fucking movie. Yeah. That's not who I am.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. This is you can trace it right back to the power of the story that Larson created, is that here we are so many years later after all of these different versions have come out, and, we're still talking about it.
Well, one thing that I'll probably end on is, obviously, this is a difficult, confrontational, I've said that word like 8 times today, unique, in a way, work. And I feel like I don't like the idea of like, trigger warning. That, to me, misunderstands what it is to be triggered by something. Mm-hmm. Like, trigger warning, I'm going to talk about rape. Like, okay, but I dated a girl once who was a survivor of rape when she was a teenager. She was very young. And she would get triggered by seeing a red Jeep. We'd be out and about, a red Jeep would drive by, she'd have a little panic attack. Because she was raped in a red Jeep. Saying the word rape around a rape survivor isn't triggering. Triggers are unique and individualized. So having just a general trigger warning about, oh, we're going to talk about rape, that's not that helpful.
No.
But real triggers out in reality, like things that trigger our trauma, cannot be fixed with a trigger warning. I can't say there might be a red Jeep that's going to drive by, avert your eyes.
Right.
Because that's not how reality works. I've got my own triggers that I've had to deal with when they've come up. Some of them are so fucking benign that you wouldn't think to ask or say trigger warning beforehand. Regardless, like you should know what you're getting into with these stories because they are very explicit in their sexual violence. But again, that's needed. Mm-hmm. That's part of the point of this and why that it is powerful. And so as a result, I guess pick your poison. Comic book, novel, or movie series.
Right.
Whichever one would click with you the most, search them out. I'm 2 for 3.
On the way.
And definitely for me, the movie is the most. The fucking Swedish series was the one that clicked with me the most. I like the American one, but it felt like a movie. Whereas, again, I clicked so much with the Michael in the Swedish movies that's what's in my head. What was the one for you?
It was there, and then it went out. Well, I love Noomi Rapace. She just does a fantastic job, and I'm not belittling her at all. But I remember the first time I saw the trailer for Fincher's version, and I saw Rooney Mara, and it's so rare that you see a character from a book on film, and you go, oh my god, that's exactly what she looks like in my head. Yeah. And so her look is the definitive Lisbeth Salander for me, but I feel like they both offer so much, and obviously we both love these characters so much. And I know that sounds cheesy to say sometimes, but yeah, and so whichever version you go with. I'm not a big fan of the comic. I don't know if I want to read the second one. I'll do it if you finish it and you're like, no, you really should give it a try. But in these stories, if you're interested and you can try and process what happens in them, I think they're very valuable stories.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, yeah, that was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Vertigo Comics.
Yes.
Everything else. I don't know. I apologize for making an episode that wasn't as fun as the others. But again, I don't know. That's life. That's art. Sometimes you have to be confronted with shit. And just allow yourself to feel it. So, if you haven't read these, give them a shot. And if you haven't read them, how did you get this far?
Exactly. Why are you still listening?
Yeah. God, you're weird.
Don't you have anything better to do on a Saturday night?
All right. Well, but regardless, thank you for listening. I promise we'll be more fun next time.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.